This is the Spurscast with your host, Paul Garcia.
And welcome back to another episode of the Spurscast. On today's episode, I will be joined with Project Spurs Director of Digital Content, Joe Garcia. Joe and I will discuss the Spurs being on an 11-game losing streak now and the team's three-point shooting this season. Let's go and jump right into this episode with Joe. Joe, how you doing?
Doing good. I wish the Spurs were doing better, because that would make the holiday season that much more festive. But unfortunately, the team's in the middle of an 11-game losing streak, and I don't know, Paul. It's looking kind of grim, man. All I'm asking Santa for is a win.
Yeah, man. I mean, you and I you basically have been the only person I've been talking to these last few weeks. And I mean, it's kind of been the same story. I mean, we started when this losing streak began, and then, another week goes by, and then we take Thanksgiving off, and then they're still on this losing streak. So, Joe, let's go ahead and recap how the team did in their last three games since you and I spoke just a week ago. So they went 0-3 on their most recent three games. They let's go back to last Wednesday. They were on the road at OKC. They lose by 8 points. So this was a little bit more competitive game for San Antonio. We do want to note that the Thunder were favored, and the Spurs were the injury bug really caught San Antonio here. They were without Jakob Poeltl, they were without Jeremy Sohan, Josh Richardson, and then the Thunder were without SGA, their best player, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The Spurs actually came out and looked like this losing streak was going to end. They were up by 17 points in this game in the first half. And then nope, the game starts to I've been making those charts like you see the game story, and then all of a sudden you see the third quarter comes and whoop, OKC kind of takes the lead there, and so OKC took over in the fourth and they ended up winning this game. So that was the Spurs' best chance recently of ending the losing streak. Then the Spurs went back home and they hosted the New Orleans Pelicans, and the Pelicans beat them by 18 points. The Pelicans were favored. This is the one where Coach Pop was out. He's been out for 2 games with the team's calling a minor medical procedure that he underwent, and so he is expected to be back on Thursday when they play the Rockets. So there was no Coach Pop, no Poeltl, still no Sohan. Doug McDermott was now on the injury report. So was Richardson. And then for the Pelicans, they were without Brandon Ingram and Herb Jones in their starting lineup. It was a pretty close game for San Antonio all the way up into the third quarter. Then all of a sudden, New Orleans takes off and they end up getting that 18-point lead and winning. And then the most recent game was one where it was over pretty quickly. The Spurs lost by 38 points. You mentioned this just you and I talking before we started recording, Joe, that they fell behind by over 40 in this game. Mm-hmm. Still no Coach Pop, still no Poeltl, still no Sohan, still no McDermott or Richardson. Chris Paul was out for the Suns, and so was Cam Johnson. But I mean, this one was over fast. They got blown out by halftime. It was already over. And so this is a tough part for me, Joe, is yes, the Vegas says, they were supposed to go 0-3 and they did go 0-3. So it's and they were close in 2 of those games. Like I said, it's just, man, that's kind of like the give and take. I know that they're injured and, this is kind of, they're expected to lose, but it's when does this losing streak kind of end? What are your thoughts on these most recent 3 games?
Oh man, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. The decline is, and you can attribute that to injuries. I mean, but injuries are part of the process when it comes to playing an 82-game regular season. All teams are dealing with that.
Yeah, for sure.
But the issue with the San Antonio Spurs is, as I've told you before we even came on air here, it's just the little things. Basically, it boils down to effort. It's plain and simple. And Coach Pop has said it, and so have some of the players when they're addressing the media. And what it boils down to is them just playing sound basketball for a full 48 minutes. And we have yet to see them play a full 48 minutes of solid basketball. Again, it goes with a team who is still trying to find their way, being very inexperienced and young. Losing is just going to be a teacher for them, and they're going to eventually get tired of the losing, and I'm sure it'll come to an end sooner than later. But in the meantime, we're going to be privy to some pretty brutal blowouts, and they might have the lead again, like we saw with OKC, and they might just dwindle it away, because we've seen that the team does not do very good when other teams go ahead and start pressing them, which is what we saw by OKC. And when OKC came out and pressed them in the third quarter after the halftime, that's when everything just started going downhill for them. So they have to learn how to close out games and just play better as a whole. Put the effort in there, and maybe things will turn around. But you've noticed that too, Paul. They haven't put forth the effort.
You made a great point there, Joe, especially with the injuries. I mean, you're right. Every team goes through injuries. And like we see here, every time the Spurs were missing players, yes, the other team was also missing some key players. But I think that because of the group that this team has, they have to almost be perfect when a lot of their key players are out San Antonio, whereas the other teams can afford to lose some players and they're still going to have a really good chance of winning. And so that's where you say about like the effort, and they just really have to be locked in for an entire 48 minutes. If not, games could slip away, or if they're not even ready initially, I mean, teams could just, come out, firing away like Phoenix did. All right, so Joe, now let's talk about through 24 games. Where does this team stand? They are now 29th on offense, so they've dropped one place since you and I last spoke. They were 28th last week. They're still 30th on defense. They're still 30th in net rating. They're 6-18 overall. They have fallen now to last place out west, 15th out west, and they were 14th last week. And something that they're on this 11-game losing streak, like we've talked about, and they're getting close to the franchise record. That is a 13-game losing streak back in 1988-89. And so their next three opponents, if they lose the next three games, that's it. That's 14 losses in a row, and that's a new franchise record. So their next three opponents are the Rockets on Thursday, and then the Heat. They go to Miami and play the Heat on the weekend, and then they return next week against the Cavaliers. So if they go 0-3 in these next three games, I mean, that's it. They've officially gotten that losing streak. Now, I thought that for sure against Houston, they're probably they would end that losing streak, but I'm not so sure anymore after the team put out their injury report. They already announced that 5 players are out for that game Thursday against Houston, and 4 other players are probable or questionable, and those are key players like Devin Vassell, Josh Richardson, Doug McDermott. So I mean, if you're missing Pirtle, Sohan, and then you can end up missing 4 or 5 extra players, I mean, that's a tough ask for this team to end that losing streak, even against Houston, who's a bad team as well. So that's kind of something that I'm watching. And then also for lottery purposes, one of the good things though with them losing all these games is that they've now officially have the second worst record in the league, only behind Orlando. And so that means that, again, if you're just in the top 3 worst records by the end of the year, you have those 14% lottery odds to get the number 1 pick. What are your thoughts there, Joe, on this losing streak, possibly making history if it continues?
It's just indicative of, again, the sign of the times with this team in a full-on rebuild. I mean, I was around for the 88-89 season, when they lost 13 in a row, and it was kind of brutal as well. And, they winded up drafting one David Robinson and, kind of changed their fortunes a little bit there. And not too long after that, they had another season where it was a 96-97 season, I believe, where they were losing a ton of games. They had Dominique Wilkins as their best player and the team's high scorer for the season. And if anything, goes to, I guess history repeating itself, is if this team does go ahead and go on a historic losing streak. Last time that happened, they did draft one Tim Duncan. So you have that to kind of look forward to if the balls fall in the Spurs' favor. And I mean the lottery balls by that, and they wind up getting at least a top 3 pick. You would hope it would be number 1. But again, I mean, you're going to get what you can get. So even if it's a 1 or a 2, I wouldn't be mad if we got Scoot Henderson, and I wouldn't be mad if the team even drafted Victor Wembanyama. That's the prize. That's what everybody wants right now. And that would actually make a dramatic impact on this team, just as, in years past, when they were pretty bad before they got David Robinson. It's going to sting and it's going to hurt. But, everything that we're seeing is just telling you that this is just not a very good team. Them being the second to the worst team in the NBA, they're only one step above the lowly Orlando Magic, who are taking pretty hard as well. And the Spurs, I believe, are going to wind up facing them again. So it's going to be the battle for Wembanyama. Whoever wins that has the rights, or loses that game has the rights for Wembanyama. I'm sure they'll spin it somehow, some way like that. But I mean, you just got to be patient with the team, and it's a growing process. So, even though we're showing all these numbers and you're throwing these things out there, doesn't mean that you should not support this team. Still support the team through thick and thin, because then when they get back again to true form and start flirting with that play-in game or even the playoffs, it's going to be really special for this generation of fan, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the tough thing is, like, you go through a season like this, and then what if you don't even end up with Wembanyama at the end?
Yeah.
That's the tough part, is that, like, the NBA has evened out those odds a little bit, where like it's just 3 teams get 14% chance, so it's not like guaranteed that even if you have the worst record, or you get those 14%, you're going to end up with that.
That's why the picks are vital when you're making trades.
Yeah.
You want as many picks as you can in that first round, just in case something does not pan out. At least you have some leverage, so you can either decide to move down or move up in the draft, and that's why you got those picks, right, Paul?
Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. So, Yeah, so let's go to our next topic, Joe. And this is something we kind of explored, you and I, last week, but I didn't really have much data at this point. Now, I do want to note that Keldon did have a pretty good game against Phoenix, in that most recent one. So maybe he is starting to turn his season around after he struggled here. But actually, I was just like really interested in I don't really, with the team, losing so many games in a row, I don't really tabulate the stats as much anymore. Maybe like once a week I'm getting into it. I used to do it almost after every game. And so then I just kind of got more, it's more so like, I'm not like trying to be real negative here. I'm just trying to question. I was just like, what started going wrong for Keldon here this season? And so I started going through his data, and I really saw I was using first a model from Cleaning the Glass, where like you can like see his trend lines of how he's doing, and then all of a sudden it starts dipping like around November 19th is when we really start to see it. And we do want to note though that that's when the Spurs kind of were on that in the midst of that losing streak, and then also multiple players were injured. So I think there's some context to go around there. So what I have here is Keldon before and after November 18th. So we can see here before November 18th, he was in 14 games he was averaging his minutes was pretty much the same, 33 and 31 before and after. Shots though, you mentioned this last week, Joe, that his shots started going. He started taking more shots. He and Vassell, and it's understandable if they're missing key players like Jakob Poeltl, Sohan, other players, Richardson, McDermott. It's expected that he's going to have more responsibility on the offense, and the team's struggling to create anything, so they're going to look at one of their key players. And so we do see that his shots went up by 3. He was taking 20 shots, but his points started to go down. He was scoring 23 points a night on those 17 shots initially. Then it's down to 16 points on just 20 shots. So again, he's taking more shots than getting more points. Rebounds are about the same, 5 each time. Assists are only down by about 2, 4 assists before, and then 2 assists after. We do want to note that the team is struggling from 3. Fouling kind of the same, steals the same. Turnovers, he's actually gotten better with not turning the ball over. And then when we look at his shooting, that's where I'm really seeing the difference here. And it's really his 3-point shot, as you can see there. I mean, just 9 of 50 from above the break threes, 3 of 11 right now on corner threes in this time frame after November 18th. And then even like wide open threes, 3 of 15, and then his pull up threes, he's 0 of 19 right now in this time frame. And it's interesting to see that he's taking more. He's taking 31% of his shots from that pull up 3, and before, when he was shooting really well, he was only taking 21% of his shots. So obviously a big decline for him is that 3-point shot, which we've talked about. And I really just can't pinpoint what's going on. I literally before you and I started recording, I was watching maybe like 20 minutes of game film on him, all of his shots before this time frame from 3, and then all of his shots after. I mean, his mechanics as far as like picking up the shot and releasing it, they look very similar. What I do see, and this is something Jeff McDonald, the San Antonio Express News, mentioned on a podcast, was that the arc is it does look like a little bit higher right now. Like it looks like the ball's going like way higher the arc. It almost goes like up to like the shot clock area, like that kind of vicinity before it comes down. And so I can't quite pinpoint what's going down, but with his 3-point shot, but that's obviously where a lot of his efficiencies are, where he's struggling. And so again, I don't know if it's going to start coming back now that he had that pretty decent game against the Suns, or if it's going to continue. But what are your thoughts on Keldon? I just find it very interesting when I started digging into some of this data.
Yeah, I think the high arcing shot that you're seeing there, that's trending now with him as of late. It's because you're having injuries, so you're not having the same personnel out there on the court. So he's gonna have to try to create some space, and he's gonna have to try to get a shot off in a hurry. So he's rushing through his shot, and what's happening is the reason that it's going higher is because he's going ahead and taking that off balance jumper. Sometimes you have no choice. His form is a little different as well, because if you're taking an off balance jumper, I mean, you're gonna have to kind of try to adjust for you going down. So what he's doing for him, kind of being off balance and going one way, he's compensating by overshooting, overextending himself on that shot. And that's why you're seeing that high arc, that higher arc than usual. And the other thing is if he's doing a step back jumper, again, trying to create some space and trying to shoot over his defender, that's going to cause him to go ahead and shoot a higher arcing shot. But the reason that we're seeing these things happening, or the decline a little bit of, Keldon Johnson's game, compared to, when the Spurs got off to a hot start, winning 5 in a row. And really, Spurs fans were saying, "We hooping," Yeah. But he was going into his motions a lot faster, trying to beat that double team, triple team, or even different looks that the opposing team defense is giving him. When he was doing that, I think that's when he was at his best, because he's not known so much as an isolation player like one DeMar DeRozan. So now that defenses, I think, have already figured him out a little bit more, and also the Spurs as a whole, since they know that they're not a very good offensive team, and they're very young. When they start pressing them and they start taking away those passing lanes, and taking away that ability to go ahead and get higher assists than they were at this juncture. In the beginning of the season, they were among, one of the better teams in assists. They were number one. Now they've gone down a little bit more, but because teams are taking away that is, that the passing lanes and forcing them to take bad shots, forcing them into isolation play, forcing them to go ahead and play hero ball. And unfortunately, since you're dealing with injuries and you're looking at both Keldon and you have Devin Vassell, who are your best players on this team, they're trying to go ahead and shoot as many shots as they possibly can because other players are out. So that's why you're seeing the uptick in how many field goal attempts they're making. But again, since teams are pressing them and they're giving them these different looks, they're not making a lot of those field goal attempts. So you're seeing a decline in the field goal shooting as a whole. So it goes hand in hand. Basically, it's just not there. You can't, when you focus on each individual player, your better players, these little things that they're doing as far as their game and the little, the decline, it gets amplified, I think, because the team as a whole isn't very good. So when the team as a whole isn't very good and you don't have a good supporting cast, the focus is going to be shifted more on the better players you have. And they're trying to do the best they can, but it's just the product out there is not very good. When you're 29th out of 30 teams in the NBA, you're ranked 29 out of 30 teams. You're the second worst team in the NBA. And basically the numbers aren't lying. The eye test isn't lying. They are who they are. They're just not very good at this point. But the consolation prize is getting that high pick. That can change the franchise's trajectory moving forward.
Yeah, so like you just explained it there perfectly. I do think like it's a culmination of factors, like you said, the injuries of having some of your key players out. So like you said, defense, all they have to do really is focus on him and Vassell, on Keldon Vassell. So it's a really tough time for him to be going through like a shooting slump while defense are putting way more pressure on him and he's having to do more. And you see it here, like I was just looking at the drives right now. You see that before November 18th, he was only like 50% of his shots whenever he drove the ball, he was putting up a shot attempt. Now it's up to 69%, almost 70% of the time he drives. And again, it's expected with defenses keying in on him. So that's the thing. Again, I'm not trying to be too negative here. I'm just trying to show, I just wanted for me, it was more a curious question. I was exactly like what happened, here with him. And so again, I just kind of pointed to that timeline. And like you said, Joe, it's a multiple variety of factors. The team just, like you said, 29th offense, and then they're missing key players. And that's just going to lead to a tough night.
Yeah. And then they can't shoot the three either. So if you have somebody just camping out, sitting out there in the corner, right wing three or at the top of the key, and their teams are just like, go ahead and pass it. They ain't going to make it anyway. So they just sag off of them, get ready to get that rebound. And sure enough, the Spurs missed the three and the team's heading the other way on the fast break for an easy two,
Yeah, that was actually, and that's actually why that leads to my next topic, because because if Keldon's struggling from the 3-point line and he's one of their key shooters, that's going to lead you to the team that's going to have a big factor on the team. And so I really want to dig into their 3-point shooting, because I remember just when they were in that, they were 5-2, and me and you were like, oh, they're outscoring their opponents by this many threes. We were all it's like, whoa, they've never done that. Nope, they're getting outscored by like over 100 points now on threes. So I just want to dig into the 3-point data and see really where have they really fallen off since the start of that season, and what are some factors of why. So right now I did record gathered this data on Tuesday. So they're making 11.6 threes a night, which is 17th in the league. They're shooting 33.8% from three, 21st. On wide open threes, they're only making 5 a night, which is 24th. And then they're shooting just 34% on wide open threes, which is 28th in the league. What I have noticed here, and again, for those of you watching the visual episode of the Spurscast, you see here this little green area where teams are starting to leave them wide open. So we noticed that during this losing streak on the road against the Clippers is when it starts. Teams are now saying, you're missing a lot of players. We know that y'all are injured, and it's just easier to guard you if we just pack the paint and take away the 2-point shot from you. And so teams are doing that now. They're leaving them wide open from three. And look at the Spurs. I mean, they're just not this right here. This points per shot is saying, if you should at least get at least 1 point per shot for every shot you take. A 3-point shot is worth 3 points. Look at this. They're just completely like not even getting a point per shot, just maybe like twice in like the last, whatever this is, to 13, 15 games kind of thing. And so then, and I start asking, so who are their main 3-point shooters for this team? And so, of course, they rely on Keldon. He takes the most, eight threes a game. Even though his overall shooting accuracy is 35%, we just saw how he's currently performing with the struggles from three. Devin's still shooting well, 7 attempts per night, 42% from three. McDermott's shooting well, 5 attempts, but then 41% accuracy, but he's injured. That's a key part of it. One of your best shooters is injured. And the same thing for Josh Richardson. He's taking 5 threes a night, and he shoots 36%, a good number, but again, he's injured as well. And so, basically those 4 players are responsible for 75% of the team's threes. And so when 2 of them are injured and then one of them's going through a shooting slump, one of those players, it's a really tough time for this team. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do here, was just kind of explain why exactly they're struggling from 3 and why it's completely turned around on them. And I think it's just going to get harder now that teams are starting to just, say, hey, go ahead and take threes. Let's see if y'all can beat us from the 3-point. And the Spurs are showing right now that they just don't have the shooters to do that. What are your thoughts on the 3-point line for? Oh, you kind of mentioned it, but you have anything else to say?
No, I just think that the Spurs, since they know that they're not very good, and they've been dealt a bad hand right now with injury, they're just going to have to try to play smarter. And the only way you can combat all their, let's say, misfortunes and their shortcomings is try to play great team basketball, which is something that they have not been able to do. Specifically, they need to go ahead and come out the gate right away and try to keep pace with a lot of these teams, because the Spurs, if you look at their record going back to the beginning of the season, when the team falls behind in the first quarter, and then, they are behind the gun at the end of that first quarter, meaning that they're not able to either have a tie or have a 1-point lead, and they're losing that first quarter. Their record is not very good after that. The numbers don't lie about that. And, unfortunately, they've started cold sometimes, and they get behind early, and it's hard. You put a lot of energy and effort trying to play defense and trying to get those rebounds and crash the board. And that's another area too that the Spurs are getting, out hustled on is rebounds, and again, you go and look at that, and it's just due to the team having injuries, and they're just not a very good rebounding team. They have not been a very good rebounding team over the course of the last couple of seasons historically. So that's, trend is going in the wrong direction for them, unfortunately, with these injuries. So they're just getting outworked, they're getting out hustled, and to combat that, they just need to play better team basketball. That means moving the ball, not letting the ball stick. And if you're open, try to take a mid-range jumper, because you can't knock down a 3. And what I think sometimes is they get a little cute with the ball. They overpass. And when they do that, they give up open looks. They give up good looks. And when they pass the ball to another teammate, then they're just kind of left wondering, what do we do? Okay, so we're going to have to force one up because we're already late in the shot clock with time expiring. And what happens? They wind up missing that ball. It clangs off the tip of the rim. It's a long rebound, and the other team's just on the fast break again. And the Spurs have to get back on transition defense, Paul. And unfortunately, they're just not a very good team when it comes to their transition defense. So again, it just all these things that we're saying are telling you the reasons why the team is on an 11-game losing streak, and hopefully that will change soon.
Yeah, and like the last thing, it's not even a topic, but it's just like the last thing I wrote here, you can see in the notes, is like I put, all in all, they at least need to get healthy, like get like their best players on the floor. I mean, and again, that's not going to guarantee that they'll win all these games with those, with Jakob and Sohan, everybody, and Devin, everybody together. But they have their best chance of winning games when you have like you have your whole team, and that's been another part of it. Is like I said, this team has such a small room for error, and so when you're missing key players, I mean, it's just even harder for them. And then like we mentioned, their key players, defenses are focusing it on them. So yeah, it's just like a culmination of factors, and so. I mean, that for me, it's going to be like the interesting thing. I mean, we're only at game 24, man. It's like, we still got to get, almost like 60 more games here. And it's like, this is the expectation. This is going to be a young team. This is going to be a team that's probably not going to win. They're going to lose less. They're not going to win more than like what was it, Vegas saying 22 games right now? It's like 20 games. It's like is what their pace.
I had them at 23, and I think you had them at 20 or 21. I believe.
Yeah. So right now, I'd ran the numbers. It was like at 20 right now. It's like 20.5. So it's fallen. Yeah, even more. And so like that's the thing. It's like yes, we definitely know that they're struggling, but it's also like it's kind of like expected in a way. And I guess you're right. You do want to see more hustle and more efforts. So it's kind of like, for me, it's almost like I need to go find people who covered the Sixers during the trust the process era, and like Thunder and like all those teams that have tanked before. And I just got to see, how exactly do you cover a team like this? Because man, it's gonna it's tough. And like I said, like, yes, there's definitely a lot of negatives, but it's also like it's kind of understandable in a way. But also, you don't just want to just say it's different. I think that from the past Spurs teams that we've covered, when they were championship contenders, then to that moment of like the DeMar DeRozan, DeJounte Murray teams where they were still competitive and they might have just gotten to play in game kind of teams. But now, this is completely different. Like we're talking possibly a 14-game losing streak, which would be a franchise record here if they don't win a game in the next 3 games.
I think one thing that'll help the Spurs tremendously against the Rockets is that it's rumored that they're going to wind up getting Coach Popovich back, which, I think we, as fans here looking on the outside looking in, I think a lot of not only people in the media but the fans themselves forget how valuable Coach Pop is. His leadership out there, on the sideline. So getting him back is going to be a tremendous help for the team, and maybe they'll play some inspired ball and win one for Coach Pop.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, yeah. So I mean, yeah, we'll just see what happens. I mean, we'll obviously keep going through the season as it progresses. So thanks to Joe for joining me here on this episode of the Spurscast. I also want to say thank you to Joe for mixing and producing this episode. From all of us at Project Spurs, stay safe and have a great day.